February 17, 1943. Tunisia's dusty landscape witnessed something unexpected. Wehrmacht troops overran an American supply depot near Ferrana during the initial stages of the Calorie Pass battle. What they discovered inside those warehouses would reshape their understanding of the conflict entirely. The scale was staggering. Wooden crates bearing U.S. military stamps covered several acres. When pried open, these containers revealed provisions exceeding what an entire German division might see across months of campaigning. Fuel barrels stood alongside ammunition boxes, medical equipment beside spare components, and food, endless quantities of food that hadn't been seen by these soldiers in what felt like forever. Among the treasures sat boxes marked Field Ration, Type K. 3 meals per box, breakfast, dinner, supper. Each meal package measured roughly the dimensions of 2 cigarette boxes stacked together. The breakfast tin held pre-cooked chopped ham with eggs. 4 crackers accompanied it, along with a compressed fruit bar, instant coffee powder, sugar tablets, cigarettes, chewing gum, and yes, toilet paper. This represented the American military's lowest-grade emergency provision, yet it surpassed anything these German troops had tasted in months. Each K ration delivered 2,830 daily calories across its 3 meals. But the depot held far more than emergency provisions. Field Ration Type A contained fresh vegetables and meat. Type B held canned and preserved items. Type C offered individual meal cans. Mountains of genuine coffee, not the burned grain ersatz Germans choked down. Sugar measured in tons. Chocolate bars, canned fruits, condensed milk. Most absurdly, to German observers, ice cream mix. The Americans transported ice cream ingredients across an ocean to North African battlefields, simply because their logistics allowed it. German officers conducting the inventory grasped a fundamental truth about capability differences. American frontline troops consumed minimum 2,800 daily calories from K rations alone. When field kitchens operated with other ration types available, consumption ranged from 3,400 to 4,100 calories, depending on activity levels and assignments. Official German allocations at war's beginning specified approximately 3,600 daily calories on average, with combat troops receiving higher amounts. Reality on the ground told different stories. Actual field deliveries consistently fell below paper allocations. By early 1943 in North Africa, the truth meant 1,500 to 1,800 calories on favorable days, frequently less. These calories came from increasingly questionable sources. Black bread resembling sawdust more than grain, watery soup, occasional mystery, meat from cans, ersatz coffee when obtainable, potatoes when lucky. The contrast extended beyond quantity into quality territory. American rations contained authentic ingredients: real meat, genuine eggs, actual fruit, true coffee, chocolate. German rations featured substitutes, fillers, whatever the overstretched supply network could scrape together across multiple fronts simultaneously. During the February 14, 24, 1943 Calorie Pass offensive, German forces seized substantial American material. Official tallies recorded 183 tanks, 208 artillery pieces, 104 half-tracks, 512 trucks and vehicles, critically over 57,000 gallons of fuel and lubricants, plus 45 tons of ammunition. Nobody officially counted the food, but German soldiers would remember it vividly for their remaining lives. This disparity didn't suddenly appear in early 1943. It had been building since hostilities began. When the Afrika Korps arrived in North Africa during February 1941, German logistics already showed strain. Everything crossed the Mediterranean from Italy, running gauntlets of British naval and air interdiction. Ships reaching Tripoli or Benghazi then unloaded onto barely existent transportation networks. The Via Balbia, the single coastal road linking Libya to Egypt, couldn't handle the volume. Trucks remained scarce. Distances stretched enormously. Fuel consumed during supply delivery ate into the fuel being transported. By late 1941, official Wehrmacht rations weren't reaching frontline troops completely. Commanders stretched available supplies. Rations intended for 10 men fed 12. then 15, then 20. Soldiers shed weight. Energy declined. Illness increased. The desert environment's extreme heat and limited water compounded everything. German military medical documentation from North Africa tracked the deterioration systematically. Soldiers arriving in theater typically weighed between 160 to 180 pounds. 6 months later, significant weight loss appeared. After 12 months, many had lost substantial body mass, with documented cases exceeding 50 pounds. Combat wounds didn't cause this. Chronic nutritional inadequacy did. The Eastern Front situation proved even more catastrophic. Operation Barbarossa, launched June 1941, planned as a 3 to 4 month campaign. The strategy: destroy the Red Army, capture Moscow, force Soviet surrender before winter arrived. Logistics planning matched this timeline. Light, mobile, sufficient for brief campaigning. Reality unfolded differently. The Red Army refused to collapse. Soviet forces traded territory for time, retreating hundreds of miles while systematically destroying infrastructure and supplies. German supply lines extended across distances their logistics simply couldn't support. Soviet roads were primitive at best. Rain transformed them into impassable mud. The rail system used different gauges than German trains, requiring conversion or transshipment. Trucks broke down from overuse and part shortages. Horses, still primary movers of German supplies, died by thousands from overwork and inadequate fodder. By November 1941, German armies sat hundreds of miles inside Soviet territory, with supply lines approaching collapse. Then Russian winter struck. Wehrmacht forces possessed winter clothing, sitting in German warehouses, but insufficient trains existed to transport it forward. Insufficient trucks. Everything available focused on moving ammunition and fuel. Food and clothing came second, third, sometimes never. December 1941 documentation shows the results. Temperatures plummeted to minus 30 degrees Celsius and below. German soldiers, many still wearing summer uniforms, froze while starving as logistics disintegrated. Food deliveries became sporadic. Units spent days on minimal rations. Hot meals became impossible without cooking fuel. Men consumed frozen bread and whatever they could scavenge. German High Command had ordered troops to live off the land in Soviet territories, official policy, part of the hunger plan's deliberate starvation of Soviet populations to feed German forces. But Soviet scorched earth tactics and rural Russian poverty meant little existed to take. German soldiers found themselves competing with starving Soviet civilians and prisoners for scraps. The Wehrmacht captured 2 million Soviet POWs in 1941. German policy provided these prisoners official rations of 1,490 daily calories. Practice delivered far less. By spring 1942, 2 million Soviet prisoners had died, mostly from starvation and exposure. German soldiers witnessing this mass death understood what being on the wrong side of an inadequate logistics system meant. By mid-1942, German rations across all fronts had declined from official allocations. Paper rations still appeared adequate. Reality differed sharply. At Stalingrad in September 1942, German soldiers received 1,800 daily calories. By December, encircled forces were down to 100 grams of daily bread, roughly 400 total calories. Soldiers starved while fighting one of history's most brutal urban battles. Wehrmacht medical officers documented consequences systematically. Malnutrition didn't merely cause weight loss. It increased disease susceptibility. Wounds healed slowly. Illness recovery took longer. Cold weather injuries became more severe and common. Soldiers became physically incapable of demanding tasks. Mental sharpness declined. Morale evaporated. Starting in 1944, Wehrmacht ration quality declined even when quantities were maintained on paper. Meat and fats were replaced with potatoes and dried vegetables. Bread became increasingly adulterated with sawdust and other fillers. Coffee substitutes became substitutes of substitutes. Anything stretchable was stretched. American soldiers, meanwhile, continued eating well throughout the war. Studies conducted by the U.S. Army Quartermaster Corps documented actual caloric intake precisely. In garrison, American soldiers consumed 3,400 to 3,800 daily calories. During field training and combat operations, the range was 3,200 to 4,100 calories. These figures remained consistent across all theaters: Europe, North Africa, Italy, Pacific Islands. American logistics delivered reliably. The American military treated food as strategic priority. The Quartermaster Corps employed thousands of personnel focused exclusively on feeding troops. Supply chains were constructed to move food alongside ammunition and fuel. Field kitchens were standardized, mobile, efficient. The M1937 field range could be established in 30 minutes and feed 150 to 200 men with hot meals twice daily. Ice cream became an official priority. By 1943, the United States produced 135 million pounds of dehydrated ice cream mix annually, plus 80 million gallons of fresh ice cream. It was classified among the 7 basic foods and distributed to all theaters. The military constructed ice cream plants on ships. The Navy even built floating ice cream barges in the Pacific. This wasn't frivolity. This was deliberate policy to maintain morale through abundance. German prisoners of war experienced American food culture firsthand. By war's end, 425,000 German POWs were held in approximately 700 camps across 46 states. Under Geneva Convention requirements, they received identical rations as American soldiers, approximately 3,200 daily calories, equal to what American troops consumed. The results were dramatic. German POWs gained weight in captivity. One prisoner recalled weighing 128 pounds at capture and 185 pounds after 2 years as a POW, gaining 57 pounds. He wrote that he'd gotten so fat you could no longer see his eyes. Another prisoner gained similar weight, later stating the food abundance seemed sinful compared to what German civilians were eating. Historian Arnold Kramer, studying German POWs in America, noted many prisoners gained substantial weight, which their families immediately noticed upon post-war return to Germany. Some prisoners ate better as captives than they'd eaten as soldiers in their own army. This fact wasn't lost on them. Approximately 5,000 German POWs later immigrated to the United States, partly because of positive captivity experiences. One documented case: Ernst Floater, born August 8, 1925 in Stettin. Drafted into the Wehrmacht, he served with the German 91st Division. The American 82nd Airborne Division captured him in Normandy during June 1944, 12 days post-D-Day. He was 18 years old. Floater later recalled his first American custody meal. He couldn't believe the quantity: eggs, bread, real coffee, fruit. He thought there'd been a mistake, that this amount was meant for several men, not one individual. American guards assured him it was standard. He wrote in his diary describing the abundance and waste he witnessed. It was sinful how much food the Americans possessed and how much they wasted. Floater spent the war's remainder in POW camps, first in England, then the United States. He was well-fed, well-treated, given opportunities to work for wages. After the war, he returned to Germany briefly, then immigrated to the United States, where he lived over 50 years, dying in Grand Ledge, Michigan in August 2015. He never forgot that first American meal and what it revealed about the vast capability gap between the two nations. The logistical superiority extended beyond food. American forces possessed mobility German forces couldn't match. The United States produced 2.6 million trucks during the war. Germany produced just over 300,000. American trucks were standardized, making maintenance and spare parts simple. German forces used a hodgepodge of captured vehicles: French, Czech, Polish, British, Italian, plus German models. Spare parts were nightmarish. Maintenance was chaotic. American supply doctrine assumed abundance and redundancy. Multiple supply routes, stockpiles at multiple levels, backup plans for backup plans. The Red Ball Express, the truck convoy system supplying forces after D-Day, moved 12,000 tons of supplies daily at peak. using over 6,000 trucks operating 24 hours daily. German supply doctrine assumed scarcity and improvisation. Make do with less. Capture what you need from enemies. Prioritize ruthlessly. Hope for the best. This worked in short campaigns like Poland and France, where German forces could rely on captured supplies and intact local infrastructure. It failed catastrophically in extended campaigns like Russia and North Africa, where distances were vast, infrastructure was poor or destroyed, and captured supplies proved insufficient. By late 1944, German strategic planning explicitly incorporated captured supplies as necessity, not option. Operations were designed around assumptions that German forces would seize enemy fuel, ammunition, food. This wasn't confidence. This was desperation. The Battle of the Bulge in December 1944 demonstrated this failure completely. Adolf Hitler allocated 28 million liters of fuel for the Ardennes offensive. Only 14 million liters were actually assembled, enough for roughly one-third to one-half the distance to Antwerp under combat conditions. Field Marshal von Rundstedt's forces started with 6 days of fuel maximum. Hitler explicitly stated German forces would have to rely on capturing Allied fuel dumps during their advance. SS Obersturmbannführer Joachim Paper, commanding one of the spearhead units, knew before beginning that he lacked sufficient fuel to reach his objective, the Meuse River. His plan required capturing American supply points along the route. German intelligence had identified the Stavelot fuel depot, containing 3 million gallons of gasoline. Kampfgruppe came within 1,000 feet of it, but failed to capture it before American forces destroyed the stocks. By December 19th, day 4 of the offensive, all of General Otto von Manschaufel's tank units were desperate for fuel. Many ran dry within 4 miles of the Meuse River, their objective clearly visible but unreachable. The offensive collapsed. Fuel shortage was a primary factor. German forces had planned an operation they couldn't sustain logistically and gambled on capturing what they needed from an enemy who fought harder and destroyed their supplies more effectively than German planners anticipated. American forces during the same battle faced logistical challenges, but solved them through overwhelming capacity. The American Third Army under George Patton pivoted 90 degrees from its axis of advance and moved 3 divisions over 70 miles in 48 hours to counterattack the German penetration. This required moving not just 133,000 soldiers, but all their supplies, fuel, ammunition, food. American logistics made it happen. German logistics couldn't have attempted it. The contrast was visible in every theater. In Italy, American soldiers ate hot meals from field kitchens most days. German soldiers ate cold rations most days and hot meals when field kitchens could operate, increasingly rare. After D-Day in France, American logistics were so effective some forward units received ice cream delivered by aircraft. German troops in France were eating bread adulterated with sawdust, and soup so thin soldiers joked about seeing through it. In the Pacific, American soldiers complained that sea rations were monotonous, wanting more variety. Japanese soldiers trapped on isolated islands were eating whatever they could find: grass, roots, tree bark, and in documented cases, human flesh. Thousands of Japanese soldiers died of starvation on bypassed islands where American forces never needed to fire a shot. By early 1945, the food situation in Germany itself had become catastrophic. Official civilian ration was 1,670 daily calories in winter 1944-45. In practice, with distribution networks collapsing and black markets absorbing much available food, actual consumption was often 1,200 to 1,400 calories. In some urban areas experiencing siege conditions, it dropped as low as 800 to 1,000 calories. People starved. Children showed severe malnutrition signs. The elderly died in large numbers, unable to survive on rations insufficient to maintain body weight. The German government prioritized military rations, but even Wehrmacht forces were suffering. Quality had declined so far that military physical examinations documented ever-increasing malnutrition starting at the end of 1942 for conscripts born in 1924. By 1944 and early 1945, U.S. Army medical assessments noted captured German soldiers showed clear signs of deficient preventive medicine programs and inadequate food allowances. When Germany surrendered in May 1945, the food crisis worsened before improving. With the Nazi government collapsed, no entity coordinated food distribution. American and British occupation forces found German civilians in their zones receiving approximately 1,000 to 1,250 daily calories. General Lucius Clay, the American military governor, stated bluntly in August 1945, "There is no choice between being a communist on 1,500 calories a day and a believer in democracy on 1,000 calories." American occupation policy, initially codified in Directive JCS 1067, was deliberately harsh. Germany was to be prevented from economic recovery. Food imports were restricted. German civilians were not to be fed better than the worst-off populations in Allied nations. American soldiers were under strict orders not to share their rations with Germans. These orders extended to soldiers' wives when they arrived later. Food was to be destroyed rather than given to Germans, though individual soldiers frequently ignored these orders when confronted with starving children. The policy changed in 1947. Directive JCS 1779 replaced the punitive approach, noting that an orderly, prosperous Europe required the economic contributions of a stable and productive Germany. Food aid increased. The Marshall Plan beginning in 1948 shipped millions of tons of food to Europe, including Germany. American agricultural abundance, the same abundance that had fed American soldiers so well during the war, now fed the defeated enemy back to health. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. The United States had demonstrated during the war it could feed its own military 3,500 daily calories while projecting that capability across oceans to multiple continents simultaneously. After the war, the United States demonstrated it could feed much of Europe, including former enemies, preventing mass starvation while rebuilding entire economies. This was power of a kind few nations in history had possessed. The calorie gap was never officially acknowledged during the war. Nazi propaganda never admitted German soldiers were starving while American soldiers ate ice cream. But soldiers knew. Every German soldier who captured American supplies knew. Every prisoner who ate in American camps knew. Veterans returning from every front knew. The knowledge spread through the civilian population despite censorship. After the war, military historians and analysts studied logistics' role in Germany's defeat. Their conclusions were unanimous. Germany faced many disadvantages: Soviet manpower, American industrial production, British determination. But underlying all of them was fundamental logistical inadequacy. Germany couldn't feed its military adequately across multiple fronts for an extended war. Therefore, Germany couldn't sustain the war effort. Therefore, Germany lost. Numbers compiled from Quartermaster Corps records and Wehrmacht documents tell the story with brutal clarity. In 1943, an American soldier ate approximately 3,500 daily calories. A German soldier ate approximately 1,500 to 1,800 daily calories, sometimes less. Over weeks, this gap manifested as weight loss and fatigue. Over months, it became malnutrition and increased disease. Over years, it meant an army that couldn't sustain combat operations effectively against an enemy that was well-fed, well-supplied, and growing stronger while Germany grew weaker. The Americans weren't just outproducing Germany in tanks, planes, and ships, though they were doing that too. They were outfeeding Germany in calories, nutrients, and basic sustainment. In a war of attrition, this mattered as much as any weapon system, possibly more. The fundamental lesson was clear and remains clear today. Modern warfare is decided by logistics. An army marches on its stomach, as Napoleon allegedly said. Feed your soldiers well, and they can fight effectively. Starve your soldiers, and they'll lose regardless of courage, training, or tactical skill. This isn't abstract military theory. This is historical fact documented in millions of ration reports, medical records, and after-action analyses from all sides. When German forces captured that American supply depot at Ferrana on February 17, 1943, they were looking at physical evidence of this gap. Some German officers looking at those supplies understood immediately what it meant. America possessed logistical capability Germany couldn't match. That realization in February 1943 meant the war was effectively over. It would take 2 more years and millions more casualties to make it official, but the outcome was no longer in doubt.